So this is the first video in the Packer in the Cloud series. In this video, we're going to take a Packer build and we're going to build two AMIs, a Linux AMI and a Windows AMI. For the Linux image, we provision the system over SSH, installing Apache and setting up a small collection of retro-style HTML games. This gives us a lightweight but functional web server that we can deploy quickly. On the Windows image, we first apply all system updates. Now we're going to start with Windows 22 Server as our example. And after we do the system updates, we're going to install Chrome and Firefox. So that should give us a desktop environment that has the three major browsers: Edge, which is installed by default, Firefox, and Chrome. Now, the configuration for Windows is a little bit more complicated than Linux, and this is especially true in AWS. We need to fully configure WinRM manually by using a custom user data script. And that configures the instance, sets the user ID and password, and everything else necessary for Packer to be able to connect. After the provisioning is complete, we use the EC2 Launch tool to Sysprep and generalize the Windows image properly. If we do not do that, the user data won't run. It sometimes cannot get a license if you're in a different VPC. And in general, it's just not going to work very well. So you need to use the EC2 Launch tool, which at the end of the day is going to call Sysprep after doing some other maintenance issues. So we're going to build those two images with Packer. And once the images are created, we're going to deploy two instances based on those. Of course, we'll have a Linux server that's the games server. We'll make the IP address public so we can go hit the games to test. And the second one is going to be the Windows server, and we're going to be able to connect with RDP with a set of credentials that we create. When we create the images, we create local accounts, a Linux local account, a Windows local account. It has the user ID is Packer, and then we generate a random user ID and take that user ID and put it into Secrets Manager, and that's what we'll use to end up testing these. Okay, so now let's talk about the Packer workflow. You start with the Packer code. Now we use the HCL version of it, which is HashiCorp control language. And we're going to use that. Sometimes on the web, you'll see a JSON version of Packer code, but we're using the more modern HCL. And so in the Packer code, there's really two sections where you specify what image to use to start up with an AMI, and the network settings. And then the second part is the provisioners. This is what does all the work to install the software. So when you take that Packer code, we're going to pass it to the Packer CLI. And the first thing it's going to do is, based on the AMI that you specified in here, it is going to start up an EC2 instance. Now, depending on whether it's Linux or Windows, for Linux, it's going to provision a temporary SSH password, or user ID and password, that has sudo access, so it can do all installs. And then we're going to create, with that custom user data, a WinRM user ID and password. And we also will add it to the administrator groups. And I think there's a certificate that gets added. Everything that's necessary for a Windows provisioner to run. So at the end of the day, for the Linux instance, we're going to run a series of bash scripts, primarily centered around apt package manager and copying some content into the HTML var HTML location. For the Windows version, after it connects with RM, it's going to run PowerShell code. Now, PowerShell code is not as well suited for batch installs. And so what you have to be careful with is if you're running a Windows install and something gets posted, like a dialog or something, your provisioner is going to hang. So it's a lot more trickier to have a full silent installs. There's tools like Chocolatey that help you to do that, but what we've done with Firefox and Chrome is we download from the source, and then there are options to the installers that are slightly different between the two that allow us to run unattended. So if all the provisioners run successfully, then what's going to happen is going to shut down that instance. It's going to take an AMI, and once that AMI has been provisioned, it's going to destroy the EC2, and you're just left with the AMI. So now let's talk about the prerequisites necessary to actually run this project. We setting up or a video out there called AWS and Terraform Easy Setup. It definitely applies to this. So if you've never run one of these videos before, you might want to use that. It's just a very simple, shows you what to create in the console as far as a secret and access key. But what you basically need is you obviously need an AWS account and an AWS account with the secret ID and access key. Then you have to have the AWS CLI. We use that extensively in the scripting. And then you need to install the latest version of Terraform, and you need to install the latest version of Packer. So at this point, I'm going to assume that you've done all of that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this. I'm going to go to my Ubuntu development environment, and I am going to say paste. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to run check env. This is a common script for all our projects that checks to make sure that you have everything set necessary to log into AWS. And here it does. So at this point, we're ready to perform the build. Now, the build takes about anywhere from 20 to 45 minutes. So it's a pretty long build process, but we'll go ahead and start it now. So the build is designed into 3 stages. The first phase is we use Terraform to provision a simple VPC and subnet. We also generate the Packer password and credentials and store them as a secret. The next phase is we're going to use the Packer to build both AMIs, the Games AMI and the desktop AMI. And we're going to use the network infrastructure from phase 1. We're also going to fetch the password from credentials and passes it into it. This build takes the longest part, at least 20 minutes. Often it's over 40, but it's 20 to 40. It depends on various things. And then after it's done, we are going to spin up 2 instances, each in its own subnet, and then we're going to test it. So those are the 3 phases. And at this point, all we need to do is wait for the build to finish. The build has completed. So let's first go back to the documentation and talk about the architecture diagram as to what got built here. So we're building in US East 2, which I believe is in Ohio. And what we've created is we have a VPC. I have 2 subnets. Put the Linux games in the first availability zones, and I put the desktop server in the second availability zone. Now, outside of your VPC, you've got the Games AMI that we built with Packer. We have the Desktop AMI that we built with Packer. And then we have the Packer Credentials secret. So at this point, let's go look at the AWS console and see what we have. Most of the stuff that got built with this project are in the EC2 section. So I'm going to click on EC2. And I'm going to go look at instances. It's going to show you the 2 instances running, the desktop instance and the games instance. I used the fairly modest size instances, but those are the instances that we've used. So if you also, it's kind of neat, if you say stopped, it's going to show you all states. There we go. These 2 terminated instances, what I'm trying to show is that those are the temporary instances that Packer provisions and created that actually created the AMIs. So we've got the instances, we've got the Packer evidence that it ran. So let's go look at AMIs. And I have 2 owned by me, the Games AMI and the Desktop AMI that we've created. So that's pretty much everything that got created from this build, except for the Secrets Manager. So Secrets Manager is important. So we're going to go in there, and you got the Packer credentials, and I'm just going to go ahead and retrieve the values because we're going to start to use them. One of the things I was going to show you is if I go to the EC2s, let me go to the Linux EC2, and we configured as instances. So I should be able to click on the games instance and click on that and then hit connect. the first thing I'm going to do is who am I? And that's SSM user. And if I do ID Packer, you'll see that Packer is also created as a user. So I'm going to accelerate to sudo, and I'm going to do systemctl status Apache 2. And you can see that's the service that's running. And if I do var and go to www and HTML, you'll see all the games that got deployed as a part of this. So you got the main page and then all the games. So at this point, it's time to start looking at the games. So I'm going to exit out of here. And you can also do that SSM session with the Windows instance as well to give you a PowerShell instance. So what I'm going to do is go back to the build, and I'm going to grab the games yard. I'll just copy that. Go back to the browser, open a new tab, and look. There we have the games. So we've got the games. My favorite is Frogger. So the several other commands are all sort of 80s style games, Tetris, etc. So that's it for the games AMI. So the next one is we're going to RDP into the Windows session and see if we can see the desktop, the browsers on the desktop. So I'm going to open a browser or a remote desktop connection, and I'm going to go and I'm going to copy the Windows server and put it into my RDP client. Click connect, and I'm going to use more choices, and I'm going to use Packer. And here is where you have to go in and get the Packer password from the Secrets Manager. So I'm going to click on Secrets Manager. I'm going to click on Packer credentials. I'm going to retrieve secret value, copy that, and then go back to the session here, paste in the password, make sure I got it right. This is different for every build, so revealing nothing here. Hit OK, and it's going to start the session. I kept it as a small window, and you can see on the desktop, we've got the three browsers, Firefox, Google, and Edge. We're going to do check for updates. And it should show that you were last checked today and you're all up to date. So the AMI was built with the latest updates. We also installed a boot script, and this is dangerous because I didn't check this in the practice, but let's go to mcloud, and we should have a boot log, and you can see the AMI provision boot script ran. So we put a boot script in there, we called it in user data. So at this point, we have done everything in this exercise. We've got the desktop instance, we've got the games instance. And so the only thing left to do is to be good stewards of our cloud accounts. And I'm going to go and destroy this project. Okay, so let's do a quick review of the AWS specific issues for Packer. The first one is WinRM. We've said it multiple times. You are responsible for configuring WinRM for your Windows AMI builds. And we have an example that it works pretty well. It's in your custom user data script that's included in this project. So make sure you configure WinRM, otherwise it's just going to hang and not succeed. The second thing is for Sysprep. AWS provides the EC2 Launch tool. You must use this for a Windows AMI. It's not on Linux, it's only on Windows. And if you don't, it's not going to work properly. It's going to not get the user data. It's going to have problems accessing instance metadata. It may not be able to get a license. So make sure you use the EC2 Launch tool, which at the end of the day is going to call Sysprep, but it does a bunch of other stuff too. That is specific to AWS. The other two platforms, you call Sysprep with different options. There's no special tool. And then my final point, it's not AWS specific, but Packer will allow you to transfer content from your Packer build into the instance. This is really slow. And so if it's text files, source files, it's not a big deal. It's relatively quick. But if you have any installer that's over, just a couple of megabytes, it's going to quickly become really, really slow. And it's particularly bad on Windows with WinRM. It's going to convert everything to base64 blocks, so it's going to be really painful. So what you want to do if you have a large installer is you want to download it and then run the installer from the download. Now you can use tools like Chocolatey that will allow you to download it. You don't have to know what the destinations are. You can do like we've done in this, where we go and pull Chrome and Firefox from the various downloaders that are online. But if you have custom installers or you want to lock it down to a certain version, a pattern that we see a lot is you create an S3 bucket, use the AWS CLI to download the S3 bucket, which means you got to embed some credentials, and you can throw them away. And that's a good way of avoiding the transfer penalty with transferring from Packer. So that is it for the AWS specific issues.